evening. Hi, I'm Laura Boedges, and I am a CFP candidate. This is my capstone submission for Fred and Diane Baker's financial plan. I appreciate your willingness to take it this late in the game and to grade it for me and pass me so that I can test on July the 11th. Otherwise, I'm liable to turn into some sort of a rating lunatic. So here we go. All right, so this is the financial plan prepared and presented by Laura Boedges, CFP candidate, June 10th, 2018. Table of contents, I still need to go in and put some numbers on, but I wanted to get this thing set to you. That would be the first page. We'll go through all of these items as we talk through this. So the first thing I've included here is the engagement letter, which would be addressed then to Mr. and Mrs. Fred and Diane Baker, and it outlines how we will serve them in the process of the planning, and the services will specifically include a review and prioritization of goals and objectives, summary of current financial situation, statement of cash flows, personal balance and net worth statement, evaluation of emergency reserves, a risk tolerance evaluation, including what we use here at Hightower St. Louis, Riskalyze, a current investment strategy analysis, a retirement evaluation and planning assessment, along with an insurance review, both personal and business, college planning for the children, potentially for future grandchildren, development of an action plan, referrals to needed outside resources, and a suggested implementation plan and assistance with that plan. So then we move on to, after we get signatures and a check, we move on to the financial planning process, which is really where I would start with the Bakers. So their process would include a 7-step process, which we liken to a wheel, and it has the sense of a steering wheel for a ship or a boat. So it is a constant process to be in the planning process, and we would start with a confidential questionnaire and initial review. That would take about a week. Then we'll move to the introduction and data gathering plan design process, which can take up to 2 weeks. Planning and case design, refining the plan, can take up to 2 weeks, generally not quite that long. Plan delivery and recommendations, then plan implementation and financial strategies, finalizing strategies, and then at 45 days, we'd like to do a follow-up to review your progress and make sure that your technology integration is going well. We will all through the process help you to plan and advise, implement, monitor, and update, and it goes on and continues forward. You'll hear that theme as we go through this process. So as we move forward, it's important to set the right expectations with you. The financial planning process is a holistic process, and what we'll be doing is identifying and planning your financial needs and desires. It's a process, it's not a static event, and thus we will be revisiting and updating this process as we go through. And hopefully that will be for years and years that we'll be working together that way. I'd like to grow old with you. So as a review, we did do an introductory meeting with you previously, and we explained all of the services that we'd be providing to you. We talked about the ways that we get compensated and the types of compensation that we do accept and those that we really don't accept anymore. We discussed our roles and responsibilities in the financial planning process, how decisions are made, recommendations are derived, and the nature of the ongoing planning process for and with you. So at that point, we answered questions regarding the process in our relationship, and we decided to move forward for you. So again, the financial planning process is a 7-step process. You have completed a questionnaire. We've reviewed that information, and we went into the introduction and data gathering and plan design phase, which we're really currently in with you. There's still more to be done, but you'll see from today's meeting that the plan is getting that process rolling, and we'll answer a lot of your previous questions. So we're going to talk about your goals and your values, your objectives. We're going to look at your risk tolerances. We're going to talk to you about setting up a client portal and a vault with us for document storage and sharing. Just a really valuable way to keep track of all of your valuable items, your valuable written items. And we're going to help you to begin planning a plan, putting a financial plan in place that's based on mutual understanding of where you are now and where you want to go. Once we've done that, we'll create the case for you, refine the plan. We're going to identify some of the strengths and weaknesses of your current planning, refine and outline your detailed plan with some analysis and commentary, and then we'll do we'll deliver the plan, we'll make some recommendations, we'll present it to you in a written format, usually and always. We'll take notes together and sign off on everything together. You'll get a copy of everything that we have, and of course we'll be answering your questions as you go. Once we come to plan implementation and finalization of strategies, we're going to talk about that in terms of what the expectations are and whose responsibility is it to do certain items. So there will be things that you do, and there will be things that we do. And then if there are things that you need help with, we'll help you do them. We'll do it together. So we'll coordinate implementation of the plan. And we're going to stay in touch with you throughout the process on that plan. We're also going to help coordinate you with other advisors, such as attorneys and accountants, as needed. We'll help make referrals to the right people. I call it putting together your board of advisors, those that are going to help you to be successful in your planning from now until forever, hopefully. At 45 days, we're going to monitor your progress with you just to see how things are going and to see how you're getting off on the right track. And then we're going to meet periodically, biannually or annually as needed. It just really kind of depends on you and on the plan and how much time everything is going to need. So this next page has key contact information and your client profile. So here is all of my contact data and information where you can reach me when you need me. This, of course, is you, and you know who you are. The rest of this on this page is pretty much more for my benefit so that I can refer back to ages and birth dates and who's doing what, why, where. And you know, as I look at this, I do see that I've added your mother, Fred. I would like to talk to you some more about her just to get some more data on her and some more information. Perhaps we can help you some with her as well. So we have on the next sheet the statement of projected annual cash flows. This is basically your cash flow statement based on the information that you gave me. Now at the top, you'll notice, Fred, that you have a salary of $100,000 thus far for this year, but you're planning to leave your company, at which point your salary will be unknown for a while. So for purposes of this exercise, I have included the 100 that you've made this year, and I'm certain that you can pick that right back up next year and you won't lose much time at all with the income. Diane, we see your salary at $350,000 and interest and dividends coming in at $20,000. Total inflows every year, $470,000. So on the outflows then, we're seeing, of course, your planned savings, which is your 401k. At age 47, Fred, you are maxing that out this year at $18,500 contribution plus whatever your, well, now I remember your employer does not actually contribute. So you're maxing out at $18,500. If you were to stay with the company in a few years, of course, you could put another $6,000 in there as a catch-up provision after 50. Diane, you are maxing out the SEP and have been for a while, and we're glad to see that. That is great progress. So total planned savings for the two of you each year, and this year, $72,500. In your ordinary living expenses, we're seeing that your home is paid for, which is great. So you're not seeing any number there in your principal and interest. You do have taxes and insurance to pay on your home, as well as all of the normal expenses. If you go down about halfway through the expense list there, you will see that there is a section there for family gifts, which is the amount that it takes to help support Fred's mom, and that amount currently seems to be an unknown. So we're not counting it here, but as we move forward, we may like to try to get a number that's attached to that so that we know exactly what to expect, particularly if she becomes more expensive than you might have imagined. So we might have you do some expense tracking on mom so that we can put a number in there. For today's purposes, we're going to go with ordinary living expenses of $164,000 a year. Based on your income and today's high income tax bracket of 50% for you, your federal income tax is coming in annually at about $150,000. FICA at 7 and self-employment tax for you, Diane, at $25,000, making your total tax outlay $182,000 and your total outflows $418,500. Fortunately for you, you still have net cash flow of $51,500. So you're sitting pretty well there on the cash flow front. Moving on, statement of financial position or your personal balance sheet. Currently, as of the latest numbers, you have about $25,000 in the checking account and $100,000 in a money market. So your total cash and cash equivalents are $125,000. Your investment assets, I have divided up just a tad bit differently than you might be used to seeing. But we've got Fred's stock in one category there at $600,000. All of the mutual funds together, both Fred and Diane's mutual funds, at $910,000. Cash value life insurance does actually go into the investment asset bucket at $190,000 for the two policies. Fred, your 401k is at $750,000, and Diane, your SEP is at $1,750,000. Total investment assets with the life insurance, $4,200,000. Your business assets, as you've currently outlined them, Diane, you estimate your business to be worth about $250,000, and Fred, you have about $250,000 invested in your equipment. So your total current business assets are listed at $500,000. Use assets, which we really define as your home, your personal property, and your cars, total $800,000. Good for you. You have no liabilities and no debt, so there's nothing in that line to take away. And you have a net worth then of $5,625,000. So total liabilities and net worth, $5,625,000. So one of the things I wanted to do to make sure that we were properly positioned here, and one of the first things I do with all of my clients is be sure that they have an adequate emergency fund set aside in case something were to happen. So for you, I just did a little bit of analysis here, and starting with some basics, we looked at your annual ordinary expenses of $164,000. Divided by 12 months in a year is monthly expenses of $13,666.67. And if we were to look at, moving back here to your expenses for just a moment, we can see that we have you broken into non-discretionary and discretionary categories. So coming back then to the emergency cash fund, what we want to do primarily is consider the non-discretion and the discretion separately. So your discretionary funds, those are dollars that don't necessarily have to get spent in a month. And if you were in an emergency setting, you might not make those expenditures. So we're looking primarily at your non-discretionary expenses. So on the low side, for 3 months of non-discretionary expenses, you would need $35,666 in your liquid or cash accounts emergency funds. On the high side, if we were to include everything in your lifestyle, you would need around $82,000 for 6 months. So with you for right now, your monthly expenses are $13,667. You have $25,000 in your checking and $100,000 in the money market. So total cash on hand is $125,000 less this month's monthly expenses, because technically they're already gone. Available for emergencies then would be $111,333, and that's well in excess of the $82,000 on the high 6-month lifestyle. So emergency cash fund is sufficient. So that's a good start. We're off to a great start here. So let's talk for a minute about the current economic environment and some of the things that are going to play into your planning. The economy impacts individual financial conditions and contributes to how financial plans get created. The current economic factors at play are tax brackets are in the 20 to 50% federal income tax bracket range, and as your income level, good for you, you're in the 50% tax bracket. My mom once told me we should celebrate when we get into that highest tax bracket, because that means we're doing very, very well, although I know it doesn't always feel like it. 20% dividends and capital gains tax is the top rate, and that's the rate that you have to pay on your investment gains. $10 million is the applicable exemption credit amount available, or required, I should say, for estate and GST tax these days. So each of you get a $10 million exemption, and every dollar in your estate or that you gift away over that $10 million gets a tax of 50%, and that's flat. There is no grading up into that. So it's very expensive to have an estate worth more than $20 million for the two of you, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that. In addition, there is a $25,000 annual exclusion for lifetime gifts per donee. So that means that if you were to gift money to your children, you have 3 of them, you could gift to each of them $25,000 per year. That $25,000 per child gift per year would then be subtracted from the exemption amount of $10 million for each of you. So $25,000 is once for you, Diane, and once for you, Fred, so it's $50,000 total per child per year for the two of you. They call that the unified exclusion. Currently, medium real short-term rates are hanging at about 4%, and high real long-term rates are hanging at about 8%. These are decent rates. We had, years and years of low interest rates, and it was very hard to grow anything. And there are some downsides, of course, to those long-term and short-term rates being at 4 to 8, but overall, it's a good thing for you. There is high economic growth right now, which is also going to be helpful. Employment is at medium. It may or may not mean anything to you, except Fred, you're getting ready to start a company. You may be looking for some employees, and that might make a difference to you. So it's something to kind of keep in mind. Inflation right now is average. We're at about 3.24%, which we consider the average. If I look at the average inflation rate from 1914 to 2017, it's right about in there. So it's considered medium. It's not high, it's not low. Okay, so this next page, now you were good enough to do for me a risk tolerance assessment through the Riskalyze software that we use, and your results came back as follows. So Diane, your risk came back at a 64. You did a detailed questionnaire for us, and you came back at 64. So the way that Riskalyze works is it gives every individual a score based on the answers in the detailed questionnaire between 1 and 100. Really, the range is between about 20 and 80. If I put in every one of the stocks in the S&P 500, all of them into the program, it spits out a risk of 80. Why is that? Do you say, that's 500 equities? You would think maybe that would be 100 or closer to 100. The reality is that in the S&P 500, you've got a lot of great blue chip stocks, the ones that have been throwing off income and dividends for years, and they're very stable. So they do bring that risk down some. But again, being in equities is risky, and it does cause an 80 score. On the low end, on a 20, basically that's somebody that just has no tolerance for risk at all. Can't lose a nickel, can't lose a dime, is going to lose sleep if they lose money. And I mean lose sleep. So Diane, you came back at a 64. Now, what does that mean? That means that you're kind of a moderate to aggressive type investor. And if you look to the right on the graph there, you will see that with your assets at $5,400,000, you answered the questions in that you would be willing to take a 13% risk on the downside in exchange for a 21% opportunity to gain on the upside. So if you were to lose 13% in the market, you would lose $723,470, and you would consider that a devastating loss. You would not want to see it go any lower than that. But you're willing to go that low for the possibility that you could potentially gain $1,107,950. So you're not so risk adverse. You have a good tolerance for risk, and clearly you know the business and you know what you're doing and what you're getting into. So that's probably what leads to that. That combined with your age, because you have time to retirement, conceivably 20 to 25 years to retirement, you have time to be a little bit less risk averse. So it's okay. It's a great place to be. There's no bads, goods, no rights or wrongs in this. It's just how you feel. Fred, you came back more conservatively at a 44, and I think we've, seen that in our conversation as well, that you don't like change, and anything that's going to put you at any kind of risk at all is going to be something that you struggle with. So for you, a devastating loss would have been no more than 8% on the downside. A loss of 431,000, almost 432,000 would be devastating for you. You're willing to go that low for a potential upside of an additional 13% or $701,000. So this really did not come as a surprise to me. You're more of a conservative to moderate investor. If I was between a 50 and a 60, I'd be a moderate. So you're pretty much on the conservative side. But not to worry, it's not, again, bad or good. It's just for us to know. So with regard to Riskalyze, what we can do is we can put your entire portfolio, every holding and asset into Riskalyze, and it will kick out a score for you that compares how you're invested with what your actual risk tolerance is. And we'd like to do that for you. We just will need to get every detailed statement from you so that we can do that. So we want you to understand, if you don't already, that there is relevance and meaning in your risk scores and what that means to the financial planning process and your investments and your potential outcomes. Because if you're not able or willing to take risk, but you are going to come up short on your goals and objectives, then of course it's going to be important to understand that taking some risk is necessary. When you're planning and you are well off, then maybe you don't need to take as much risk. In fact, we're pretty conservative, and we wouldn't recommend that you take any risk at all if you don't need to. And if you are if you're sitting well and you're not going to be needing more than what you potentially already have, there's no need to put what you have at risk. So, we'll talk through that as we go through. We'll be discussing some of that as we go down the process. So what are your goals and objectives? Based on our prior conversations, what I've gleaned from this is, and I have these ordered here for you based on those conversations, but it really does seem as though they're very closely related, that each of them is very important to you. But first and foremost, Fred, I know particularly for you, you're very anxious to get away from MFG Inc. and start your own company. So I have that as the first thing because you're actively working on doing that right now. Diane, I know it's equally as important for you to keep and continue growing your financial business, and we absolutely want you to do that. Next to that, and again, not far behind it, because these kids are in it now, all of your children need to complete their degree programs and go on to find additional education or find jobs and become productive adults. And I've included Sally in that analysis. I'll talk with you a little bit more about that when we get to education. It's also very important to you, because it's happening right now, that you provide for Fred's mother, creating a plan that would cover the cost of long-term care for her dementia-related illness. Again, right now, maybe she's not costing much and there's not a lot showing up in your expenses regarding that, but eventually that may be something that happens to you and starts to cost you more than you're used to spending. And we need to talk about that and try to put that into the plan for you. Also, I know, Diane, you're working on completing the settlement of your parents' estate. So now you've got a whole new bucket of money. And that's a great thing to add to what you already have and what you're going to have coming in. But now you get to redo your own estate planning, because those additional dollars have absolutely changed your trajectory, and you're going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board here on your estate plan. So I think the need for planning around these issues is clear to you. It's clearly why you're here and why you came to us. And Diane, I know your background experience will go a long way to making the suggestions contained in the plan both apparent and relatively easy for you to accomplish. So what are the strengths in what you've presented to me? And Diane, I appreciate that you're also a CFP planner. So I hope that you will take this in the spirit in which it's meant. This is peer-to-peer feedback here, and you're welcome to debate all of this with me. But for now, let's just kind of run down through and see what my thoughts were, and then we can talk about it. So you have enough time, you have enough income, and you have to manage the expenses. You have enough income and expense latitude, basically, for Fred to risk leaving his salaried position at MFG and to start his own company. This is great. This is a good strength. Grandpa largely funded college educations for the kids by gifts to their utmost, which is a good thing. I'm not sure that's exactly what those gifts were intended for, but we're going to talk a little further about that. Your emergency savings account, as we discussed, is fully funded, so that's a strength. Diane, your personal investment strategies have all been delivering positive returns between 4 and 20% over time. You've done a really good job of saving, and you have no debt. So these are all strengths in your financial planning so far. Some of the weaknesses that I've seen are that, of course, Fred's income will be uncertain for the near future. That's going to be a weak spot, little chink in the armor there. Additional retirement savings will likely drop off for a period of time as that transition gets made to, from leaving salary to creating income separately. You can take the COBRA health insurance as planned, but you can only use that for 18 months. So at some point, you're going to have to get some more health insurance. Lack of deductible debt may leave you a little more vulnerable to the payment of taxes. So not having debt is good on one hand, and on the other hand, it does leave you kind of sitting out there with no deductions to help you with taxes at tax time. Fred, your mom and her care could be significantly expensive, and it could last for many, many years. There are people now with dementia and Alzheimer's who are living for 10, 15 years, and that's something that, again, we're going to want to try to look at. And I don't see it anywhere in your plans. And then, of course, life insurance. You may not agree with me, and not everybody is a fan of life insurance, but we need to talk about it because what you have currently is really kind of inadequate for the needs of the family. So we'll talk about that some more as well. Opportunities. Fred, your business idea may increase your wealth substantially, which would be a really great thing. I'm sure you guys can both agree to that. Your newly inherited assets, although I'm sure you'd rather have your parents around, Diane, they do leave you with some new planning opportunities and some new potential for your future. There is a possibility of some life insurance planning here, and that could potentially help you with payment of taxes at your passing. There may be some ability to improve Diane's business benefits to better suit her company and to perhaps meet the family's needs. So we'll talk about that. Review of property and casualty insurance to update property coverage. We do want to talk about that. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And then there might be a possible tax deduction for care of Fred's mom. So there's some possibility there on the positive side. And then in threats are worse than weaknesses because they can mean significant losses. As a threat, Fred, your business may not take off, limiting your income, your household income, and your ability to save as a couple, as a family. God forbid that should happen. We're not wishing that on you. Only basic estate planning is currently done. So you got that done after Dad passed away, Diane, and now that both of them are gone and you've got this inheritance coming, you're really going to be vulnerable if something happens to both of you at the same time. And unfortunately, the reality is that can happen to any of us at any stage in our life. So we can't really count on getting old. We need to plan for the worst and then enjoy all the best. The total assets in your estate do exceed the unified estate tax credit. As your S Corp ownership of your company, Diane, puts your financial security at risk. There are some things you can do to mitigate that. We're going to work through that. From a life insurance perspective, Diane, you're underinsured for the protection of the family. And if you were to walk out of here today and get hit by a bus, it could cause some significant issues and problems for Fred and the kids. The children may need significant additional money for schooling, which could deplete assets needed for retirement and other expenses. So between mom and the kids, there is some planning here that needs to be talked about. Your high federal tax bracket is eating up fully half of your earnings, as you know, and I'm sure you don't like. So that's something that can be planned around as well. So let's talk about education, because the kids are in it right now. So, Sally is 21 and she's done with her undergraduate degree and she's at home and she's not working. But is there a possibility that she's going to need to go back to grad school? Maybe she hasn't settled on a career path yet. Maybe a return to school for a specific field of study is in her future. If that's the case, then you have potentially another 2 years of schooling to pay for Sally, with a 0-year planning window, because it's happening now. Maybe Sally can pay for that herself, take a loan or whatnot, but if you want to try to pay for that yourself, then that's got to come from someplace. Larry, who is 19, is a college sophomore, and while grad school seems unlikely at this point, planning for it might be wise just in case. We all know the boys tend to mature a little slower than the girls, so maybe he's going to come around, and he's going to want to go forward, because it does seem like he's just as smart as you, Fred, and loves all of the science and the tinkering and everything. Maybe there's some bigger potential there for him. It seems like off the surface. And Vicky, my goodness, at 16, ready to start college as a sophomore. This one's going to go to the moon and back. You may want to be planning not just for graduate school, but maybe even for a doctorate. You never know with Vicky. She's that smart that she might need that kind of challenge for a while now, and who knows what that could lead to. But planning for that is going to be quite an adventure, as they say. So, potential anticipated cost of college education for the kids. Cost of undergraduate tuition and fees at state colleges could be $10,000 for in-state residents at public colleges, $25,000 when room and board are included. Cost of an MBA could be $75,000 to $100,000 before scholarships and grants, etc., depending on the school of choice. Cost of a PhD could be anywhere from $34,000 to $64,000 per year, depending on that school. So, you take all of that and add to it that tuition is rising on an average of 3% per year every year. Wow, that's a big bite. So, your potential additional dollars needed to fund educations are potentially $100,000 more for Sally, although she might be. And for Larry, $75,000 to $175,000 for 3 years of undergraduate school and potentially 2 years of grad school. For Vicky, $75,000 to possibly $425,000 if she gets a doctorate level education. So a lot to think about there. So in best case scenario for you in today's dollars, you only spend another $150,000, $75,000 for Larry to complete undergraduate and Vicky to complete undergraduate school. Worst case scenario in today's dollars, you have to spend another $700,000. $700 from your assets would largely deplete the funds you currently have available in your trust mutual funds. So this would not be a good time for that to happen when we're short in income. So it's something to take a look at. So when we look at what's available in your planning for education, there were no 529s created or available for the kids, and it's really a little late now to start them. You might be able to start a couple for Vicky to get her through some of those later years, but by and large, it's on us now, so it's a little too late for those. 529s could be very good for grandchildren. Once you start, when the kids get married, let's don't rush them, but when they get married and they bring you some grandbabies, that would be a great thing to set up for them as some education funding. And you're certainly going to be looking for those tax-deferred ways to protect your estate as well, and that's a good way to do it. But we do have these UTMAs for the kids, and Diane, your father, was very gracious to provide so much money for these kids in these UTMAs. But you may already know, but just in case you don't, UTMAs can be used for education. They are subject to income tax, which will have to be paid by each of the kids as the money gets used. That would reduce the amount available to be spent on tuition, fees, room, board, etc. So, each of the children should have, by my calculations, about $260,000 in their UTMAs to date, based on what Grandpa put in for each of them. When the kids make withdrawals from the UTMAs for college costs, they will be subject to kitty tax rules, the withdrawals will. So what that means is that for unearned income, which this all is, they haven't gone out and earned a wage or received a W-2. For unearned income over $2,100, the first $1,050 is tax-free. The second $1,050 is taxed at the child's tax rate, but everything over that is taxed at the parent's tax rate, which for you is 50%. Now, of course, we have to back out the basis for each of the kids. So we're backing out, 28 times 4. And I believe I have a slight typo there in that number. So, but that could mean that, $100,000 per UTMA is lost to taxes and not available to pay for schooling. So this would leave each of them with roughly half or a little more than what they have in there now to pay for college, which may not be enough. Now, if those UTMA dollars did not get used to pay for Sally's schooling, then she still has them, and she can use them now for buying a house or going back to school. Maybe that's a way to fund her grad school and or getting married, something like that. So, and I'm be aware that she's of age and that she can get access. That is now her money, and she can do whatever she wants with it. So unless there were some specifics in trust or some specific direction that Granddad gave her for those dollars, those are hers now. Same really goes for Larry. Those dollars were his at age 18. He's 19 now. So, if he decides not to spend that on schooling, you may have some tough conversations to be having with him. What Vicki has may not be enough to pay for her. So, again, you're going to want to look at that cost and her future and what you think she is going to want to do moving forward and try to figure out how to fund that. Also, federal student aid is impacted by UTMA gifts to children as they are considered an asset of the child. So UTMAs can restrict eligibility for grant scholarships and loans. And that's just something to be aware of when you're looking for the funding sources for the college educations. Just as a note of interest, just in case it matters, the $25,000 per year is the annual gift limit per child, and your dad gave each of them $28,000 per year, so he gave them more than the gift limit. He would have had to pay gift tax on $3,000 per child per year that he did that. So thanks, Dad, for that. But the UTMAs overall were good for your dad, Diane, because the gifted money was then removed from his estate. So that was a smart thing to do. So moving on now, let's talk about insurance coverage. Proper insurance coverage is needed always to adequately plan for known risks to significant assets and sources of income. So it's always good to have the appropriate levels of insurance combined with proper estate planning and an emergency fund to ensure continuity for what you care most about. So we're going to cover the different insurances that you have and ask me to review for you on the coming pages. So let's start with life insurance. We have the life policy for Fred here. It's a variable universal life policy with a face value of $500,000 and current cash value of $90,000. Fred, you're currently the owner, and Diane, you are the beneficiary, primary beneficiary, and the secondaries are your kids. Premium is $5,000 a year. You've paid it for 12 years. I got to say, if Fred passes away, he leaves not only Diane and 3 children, but he leaves his mom. And I'm talking about, passing away sooner than later. So while Diane can support the children and Fred's mom, Fred, would the two of you like to be certain that your mom is taken care of by life insurance? So if that's the case, then Fred, you may want to consider using this policy to fund a trust for the care of your mom first, should something happen to you. Doing this on an irrevocable basis by putting it in an irrevocable trust for your mom would give you the added benefit of removing the $500,000 death benefit from your estate. You're going to need all the help you can get, so this would be a great estate planning tool for you and just one of, I'm sure, many that will come to light. Another option would be for you, Fred, to take out a term policy on your life, naming your mom as the beneficiary and Diane as the secondary. This would be an inexpensive proposition and could be allowed to lapse if your mother predeceases you. So just a thought in terms of trying to fund your mom and her staying there if something were to happen to you. Diane, on your policy, you also have the same variable universal life policy with a face value of $500,000. You have cash value of $100,000. I suspect you're a little more aggressive about your investments in that account, which is why it's doing a little bit better. Fred, you are the beneficiary with the kids as secondaries, and on this policy as well, you're paying $5,000 a year premium. Diane, really, I got to say you're uninsured. You're underinsured. As the primary breadwinner, if something were to happen to you, Fred and the family would not have enough income to survive without you. And while you just received that large inheritance, Diane, that your current estate planning may be inadequate to deal with the assets that have been received. And what I mean by that is the inherited assets may, and I haven't seen the trust from your parents yet, but there may be some stipulations as to how they are used if something were to happen to you, Diane. So Fred may not have access to those dollars. So life insurance for you, Diane, may play a very large role in your future estate planning because your net worth, with the money that you're getting from the parents, as well as the way that your assets can and very likely will grow, will very likely be subject to a state tax of 50% over $20 million, which is that unified tax exemption that the two of you get. And this could really cost your children millions. So it's, again, something to take a close look at in terms of estate planning, life insurance. You're both young and you're both healthy. You're never younger and healthier than you are today. So it's time to get those policies put in place. Even if we have some term for a while, there's ways to fund these things that don't have to cost a lot. And you may want to take some lump sums and throw them into some life insurance policies to shelter those dollars from growth moving forward. So, okay, moving on then from life insurance to your homeowner's policy. You have an HO3 policy, which is dwelling coverage with broad open perils, with open perils. Your dwelling coverage is $320,000. Your personal property is $160,000. Your personal liability is $300,000. Your deductible is $1,000 per event, and your premium is $3,000 a year. I know none of us really likes to pay for insurance. It's a fixed expense on our budgets, not something that we like to pay money for because we hope we never have to use it. But when we do it right and we have ourselves properly insured and we do need it, then we're really grateful that we did have it. So the homeowner's policy that you have as it stands is adequate to meet the needs of your family. But I feel it could be improved, and here's why. Because the HO3 policy has a benefit of being open perils for coverage A, which means the house. So all perils that are covered with the house, on the house, except for earthquake, flood, power failure, neglect, war, nuclear hazard, and intentional loss. If you want any of those things covered, you have to pick up a rider. However, the HO3 policy puts limits on the coverage for other things like other structures, which is considered coverage B. And for you, that means the barn. Just 10% of what's available in coverage on your house is available to cover other structures in this HO3 policy. So the coverage to the barn is limited to 10% of what you have on the house, which is $32,000, and your barn is worth $100,000. So if the barn burns down and takes all of Fred's equipment with it, you're not going to have really good coverage there. It also limits coverage on your personal property, which is coverage C, to 50% of the coverage amount on your house. And it limits the coverage to 30% of the coverage on your house for loss of use, meaning that the house burned down and now you've got to find someplace else to stay for a year while the house is rebuilt, and you might have limited funding there to do that based on this policy. So given the size of your house and your family and the use of the barn by Fred for his tinkering, an HO5 policy would be a better choice. It gives you open perils coverage for 100% of what your house is covered for in all 4 areas. Your home has a current replacement value of $400,000. Your current coverage is for $320,000, so you're underinsured there. Your personal property is worth $100,000. Your coverage in this area is fine for the time being. Your other structures coverage based on the HO3 is just $32,000. Your barn is worth $100,000. that really needs to be fixed. A loss of use would limit you to about $96,000. If you lost the use of the house, you could probably live elsewhere for a while, rent or in a hotel or wherever it had to be. It's okay coverage, but it certainly could be improved. Again, I recommend that you move to an HO5 policy. There's no percentage limits, and for the additional premiums that you'll pay, the peace of mind may be well worth the adjustment. On your health insurance, point of service medical policy, type of policy, group health, MFG Inc. Of course, this is going to be going away soon, but as of right now, the coverage has been quite fine to cover everything that you've needed for $700 a month. And Fred, I understand that the COBRA will cost you $1,000 a month, and that you've already notified the benefits division that when you leave, you want that COBRA coverage, and that's a good thing to have, particularly if you have a lapse of time in between having this coverage and finding something else. Again, the COBRA can only be used for the family for 18 months. This is okay on the surface, but if there were ever a serious health issue for anyone in the family, the cost might be unlimited, as there's no cap on your out-of-pocket expenses with this policy. You're also limited to HMO doctors or their preferred providers. Outside physicians could be very expensive. This might be a really good time to price and buy a family policy through the ACA or to add a group health policy to Diane's company plan to keep costs down and to perhaps improve the coverages that you're getting. On your auto insurance, let's see here, you've got a $500,000 bodily injury property damage combined single limit, $500,000 single limit on uninsured motorist. Collision has a $1,000 deductible. Other than collision has a $1,000 deductible and a $10,000 premium per year. So I noticed a couple things do seem to be missing. I do like that you have the single limit. In other words, it's not broken out for the type of payment that might have to get made if there was an accident that you caused or a payout had to get made by the insurance company on your behalf. But it does seem to be missing the medical payment section. Also missing is the underinsured motorist provision, which would protect you from financial losses due to inadequate coverage on another motorist's part. So I'd love to take another closer look at this policy to get a more complete assessment made for you. But I do think you need to revisit this with your broker and see if there's anything you can do to improve this policy. Okay, moving on now to Diane's business insurance. Diane, your business owner's policy covers, and I know you're renting the space that you're currently in with your employees, and congratulations on getting out of the house and going out and doing that. You're covered for $50,000 of loss on contents, loss of use of your space. Again, if you had to leave your rental space, move to another rental space because there was damage, and you might have to pay rent on both units or both rentals, you've only got $100,000 there. That may not go very far depending on what the cost of rent is. Liability at $1 million, that's pretty typical, and a premium of $1,500 a year, which is really not bad at all. I would say that with your annual reviews with your insurance broker, which I highly recommend that you do, as your company grows, your coverage will need to be reviewed and probably expanded to grow with the number of employees and the associated liability. I would really need more information to properly assess this. In other words, have you had any threats or complaints or lawsuits in the past that would perhaps indicate a need for more liability coverage? What are the deductibles in this coverage? How broad are the coverages? What does get covered? Does it include, product sales, data breaches, management liability coverage? What is it? There's just a lot going on in a business that needs to be properly insured. Running right into your errors and omissions policy, basically, again, liability coverage of $50,000, loss of use $100,000, liability of $1 million per occurrence or $2 million per year, and God forbid you'd ever need one, much less two. And the premium's $20,000 a year. That's a chunk. So, this coverage is definitely an essential essentially required part of your BOP and should be reviewed periodically. Also, if you have liability on yourself and then you hire another, errors and omissions on yourself and you hire another financial advisor or another licensed individual, you're going to want to make sure that you have that person properly E&O insured as well. Of course, I'm sure you know that. Liability coverage, I'm seeing liability coverage of $50,000, and I need some clarity regarding what that is. I'm not even sure what that is, to be clear. And the premium may be high. I'm wondering if you've comparison shopped it recently. Next policy is your workman's comp policy. This policy is really good to have. You have less than 5 employees right now, and you don't really have to have it. Most states don't require it if you have less than 5. But it's good that you have it and want to keep you having it as you grow. You can also self-insure if you decide to stay small. There are places where you can go to get into a group trust, which is where you were insured along with members of other companies of your size. I included a link here for you to go to so you can check some of those options out. So on the business side, it might be time to add group health insurance and dental insurance to your benefits plans because you're going to need it for the family. Also, as you grow, an incentive to become part of your team will be some of these additional coverages like life and disability insurance coverages. Also, just wondering, would your employees be equipped to take care of your business and your clients if you became ill or disabled? You might want to consider a business overhead insurance policy for that reason. Also, a commercial umbrella policy to cover you in case you get sued for an amount in excess of the available policy limits. That would then come out of your personal assets. God forbid, again, that should ever happen, but just in case, it doesn't hurt to be prepared. On the personal insurance side, as your estate plan develops, I think you're going to find the need and the use for more life insurance. Also, you and Fred both should consider personal and group disability insurance for both of you, particularly as Fred prepares to start his own business. And to that end, my best advice that I can give you is that, Fred, you should go get disability coverage in place before you leave your current employer, because they're going to look at your employment history and your earnings history for confirmation of the amount of benefit they can give you. So go get it right now, and then when you get out on your own, you can add a group policy and you'll be much better shape than you would be on your own. You might also want to add a personal umbrella insurance policy to better protect all of your assets, particularly since you have an S Corp, Diane, just in case. Also, some consideration might be, it's a conversation to have anyway, about the purchase of a long-term care insurance policy for each of you as a way to protect your family's inheritance and cash flow during your retirement years. Any good long-term illness can really deplete a lot of assets, and that's just not something that everybody should try to self-insure. You may be in a position to decide to do that. Chances that you are, but I think it's a conversation to have anyway. There are good hybrid products available now as well. So when you're looking at life insurance, for instance, you might try looking at one that combines life insurance and long-term care into one policy. Okay, debt. You have no debt, so we don't have to talk about that. Investments. All right, so Diane, on the investment side, I want to be sensitive and careful. I'm going to go over what you have here, but I know that this is your baby, and this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. So I want to talk to you particularly about this on a peer-to-peer basis so that you go away with maybe some new thoughts and ideas just based on input from somebody else. Sometimes we get to looking at the same thing over and over again, and we can't see it any differently. So right now, as I see it, you have liquid assets of $4,010,000. You have $1,080,000 in Fred's trust, broken into those 3 mutual funds and the MFG Inc. stock fund. And then Fred has 401k with a value of $750,000. Diane, in your trust, you have $430,000 broken into the global fund and the aggressive growth fund. And your SEP, Diane, which is all stocks, as I understand it, is $1,750,000. Illiquid assets, $500,000. Diane, you have your business guesstimated at $250,000, and Fred, your equipment's worth $250,000. So again, I want to make sure that I'm courteous and respectful of what you've done, Diane, and that's how we're going to have this conversation. So let's start with Fred's trust in it and the assets in it. Fred's trust has assets of $1,080,000. Mutual Fund X Well, let's just skip to comments and observations here. Given the current economic environment, this asset is really returning kind of moderate growth. It fits Fred's conservative to moderate risk tolerance and works well for a time horizon of 20 years to full retirement age. Non-qualified annual contributions create gains that are taxed at favorable long-term cap gains rates of 20%. So it's an okay fund. There may not be any reason to do anything with it. On the muni bond fund, I'm wondering how long you've had this fund, because the current balance is 120 and the basis is 120, and you're contributing $4,000 to $5,000 annually. So how do we get an average return of 4% and have no growth? It may be that it's time to go find a different muni bond fund. I like the muni bond fund idea because, of course, you don't pay federal taxes on gains, and depending on the fund that you buy, you may not pay state gains either. But it seems like this particular fund should be doing better than it is, and this one seems to be stalled. So, Fred, I know you're adverse to change, but it might be time to consider letting Diane make a change with this one, okay? Because it's not going anywhere. There might be a better fund out there. In fact, I'm pretty sure there is. So there's a really great tax advantage to having a muni bond fund, and it's the kind of fund that really, when utilized in the overall portfolio, can give you some extra tax protection, which you guys need. So Fred, let her do it, okay? Then you have this equity value fund. It has a current balance of 190 and basis of 110. It's got an average return of 9%. This is a good fund choice to add diversity to the large cap and muni bond funds. Might be a little aggressive for your risk tolerance, Fred, but it's performing well. And what you've got to look at is the portfolio on the whole, not just the one fund. So don't think there's any reason to make a change from this one. However, it's gotten big enough that you may want to consider taking the new $4,000 to $5,000 per month contributions and putting them somewhere else, and just let this one kind of roll along. On your stock, Fred, okay, so we have a current balance of $600,000. Your basis was $395,500. Your AMT tax basis, however, is $455,500 because you had to pay taxes on AMT on a portion of those stock exercises. So you have dual basis on these stocks. Your return on if we look at it from a regular tax basis, was 51, almost 52% over the 12 years that you had these stocks, and 31.72% when we add in the additional cost basis caused by the AMT tax. So when we look at this and we look at $600,000 as a portion of the $1,402,000 portfolio, we're looking at a position in stock that's really over concentrated. So we really don't want any more than about 10% of any portfolio to be in any one given stock. And given that it's your personal company stock, that makes it particularly risky. Think Enron. Those folks got really sucked into buying the Enron stock and funding their entire 401k up with it. And when that stock went belly up, they had nothing left. So that's a good reason for you to think about allowing Diane to take some of the funds from this stock, some of the stocks, perhaps selling them and moving those dollars to another type of an investment for you. You've got too much of it. Reduce your exposure. They're qualified plans. ISOs are qualified plans. They offer preferential tax treatment for you. You haven't made a sale on any of the stock that would violate the 1-year rule limiting the sale to 1 year after the exercise. So there is that tax preference if you want to sell any of that stocks. And that really is that you're going to be able to just pay the 20% long-term cap gains rate on the gains in that stock. So there might be a good reason to go ahead and make that move if you can afford it in that tax year. Exercising of the options did cause you to be bumped into the AMT category in the years of exercise, and that cost you an additional $60,000 in AMT taxes. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is that you actually can use those dollars as a carry forward credit in future tax years against other AMT taxes that might come up. When you sell the stock, you'll report the difference between the regular tax gain or loss and the AMT gain or loss as an adjustment, and that'll help you on your taxes for that year. So you really do need a qualified tax preparer to help you do this. And if you don't already have a great CPA, a tax advisor, we're very happy to refer you. We know several people that we like for this purpose. So you just let us know. So in summary then on your portfolio, Fred, your trust portfolio has generated some tax issues, and it has some inefficiencies. And again, Diane, with all due respect, I know you've done a good job. Perhaps hearing this from me will make a difference to Fred, that it's not just you saying this. I know sometimes we don't want to listen to our spouses, but it's time. It's time, Fred, to allow Diane to make some changes to your portfolio, to create some better tax efficiency, to get you better diversified, and to take some things that aren't working so well and make them work better for you. Okay, so as some ideas, explore a new muni bond fund option, reduce your stock in MFG, and begin making new annual contributions to an additional newly selected fund to improve the tax efficiency and further diversify your portfolio. If I can get some more detailed information from you, we'll generate a risk-alize assessment to match your risk tolerance number, or to see if you match the risk tolerance number in your portfolio, and then that could be a guide for Diane in selecting new or different investments to better fit your risk tolerance and your time to retirement. Also, just as a thought, if you need cash or money at the beginning of the start of your new business, Fred, there's no current gains in the muni bond fund. It might be a good place to start if you needed to get some cash. That one you could cash out without incurring any additional taxes. Diane, on your trust assets, you have $430,000 in your trust assets. You have this global fund, which has a current value of $180,000 and basis of $175, contributions of $4,000 to $5,000 annually. If I take that $5,000 difference of current value to basis and divide that into the basis, I get a return of 2.8%. I think you said you've been moving this global fund around trying to find one that you really like. Maybe you want to consider just letting this fund sit and stabilize and see what it does for a year. If you're still not happy with this, maybe you want to think about it from a broader perspective, because number one, if it's only returning 2.8, it may be more conservative than what you really, than your risk tolerance would dictate you are comfortable with. So you might be able to go find something else that would give you a better return. Also, if it is more of a moderate portfolio, in that fund, then it may just be underperforming, and you might do better somewhere else. But it's expensive to keep bouncing from fund to fund, as you know. I'm sure you don't like doing that. I do like the global fund as a diversifier for your portfolio, particularly if it's being used as a balance for the aggressive growth fund. However, I don't really know what stocks are in your SEP. So if you're holding a lot of United States-based assets in your SEP, you may want to consider moving to a pure international fund for broader diversification, because the global fund will have some US-based assets in it as well. So just to further diversify, maybe you want to think about that global fund a little bit differently. Just some thoughts. On the aggressive growth fund, this doesn't seem to be a good fit for you. It looks like it's stretching your wings a little bit on the risk tolerance. But it does look like maybe you're having some fun playing with it, which I'm all about if you can afford to do that. You've got basis of 225 and current value of 250. You're continuing to make contributions of $4,000 to $5,000 annually to it. You're looking for a 20% return. It's currently returning 11.11, which is maybe why you're continuing to move these and look for something else. Maybe we should do some research into some competitive aggressive growth funds, so we could see if that 20% is even a realistic return in today's environment. That's something we could maybe look at for you. You can look at yourself as well. We could talk about it. Okay, Fred's 401k currently has a balance of $750,000 in it. Maxing out the deferral, which is great. Unfortunately, your employer's not making a match, so too bad for them. You're going to leave them and go start your own business. On this account, you've been getting an average return of 7.5%, which is fine. That's a solid return. you're going to be leaving the company soon, Fred. So, let's talk about that 401k for a minute, because you're going to have some options. You can leave the 401k in the 401k right where it is, and they'll continue to manage it as it has been managed until such time as the employer discontinues the plan. You can do that. There's no problem doing that, and we need to let you know that you can do that. It is less expensive for you in terms of internal fees. It's very easy to leave it there. Depending on the plan administrator, they may want you to roll internally from the account or the fund holder to an IRA inside that company. So if it's a Fidelity IRA, or 401k, they may want you to roll to a Fidelity IRA and continue to help you manage it that way. You can certainly look at that if you would like. You can roll it out to a rollover IRA and hold it with Diane and let her invest it for you. You can roll it out to an E-Trade, Scottrade, Ameritrade, one of those companies where you can self-manage it if you like as well. So you do have choices. I kind of prefer the rolling it out myself if it were me, because I like to have more choices in the investments, and I like to make sure that I'm in control of my assets. I don't really want to leave money in a plan where I'm no longer employed and I'm stuck with 401k rules and regulations regarding what I can do or what I can't do with those dollars, how I can get them if I wanted them, et cetera, and so on. So something to think about there is when you leave the firm, you're going to get some paperwork from them. They're going to spell out all those options for you, and you're going to have some choices to make. Feel free to ask questions about that when the time comes. If you should opt not to leave your company, Fred, just continue to max it out. I looked at the way that you got it invested here at 40% growth in income, 30% high yield, and 30% convertible bond fund. It's a conservative to moderate mix and generally in alignment with your risk tolerance. You do, however, have 20 years to retirement and 23 years to R&Ds. So you might want to go a little bit more aggressively invested to take advantage of that tax deferral and the time in the market to bounce back from any kind of market downturns to improve your returns. When you do roll the funds out, it might pay to take a different approach to the investment selection. You might want to get a little bit more involved with it with Diane as she's making those choices for you or helping you to make them. Particularly since the investments that you choose are part of the bigger portfolio for the family, and we want to make sure that we're helping you create a balance that fits your risk tolerance, your time frame, and everything else that's going on estate planning wise. So once you get to your new company, Fred, you're going to want to create a new retirement savings plan as soon as you become able to support one. You're going to have options and choices at the time. You got a SEP, a simple, a solo K, just for starters. And again, we can talk about that when the time comes. We'll help you figure it out. Diane, on your SEP, you've got a current balance of $1,750,000. Congratulations, this is great. Your average return is 10%. You are maxing this out. I said that earlier. I think that's fantastic. Keep up the good work. And you're enjoying trading stock in this account. This account does represent the majority of your overall portfolio holdings, and I know you're happy with the stock that you're trading in the account and the returns that you're receiving. It's a qualified retirement account, which is great because your stock gains are deferred. There's no yearly payment of taxes on the growth. But I'm sure you're aware of this, and maybe this is one of those painful things I'm going to point out that you don't want to hear me say, but of course, your returns are offset by your trading costs, potentially making stock trading an inefficient investment strategy. So, that may be something to think about as you move forward with this. Also, just as a reminder, perhaps, that your SEP has a limited time frame for you now because you have hired employees. So, if you plan to keep the SEP, you're going to have to add your employees to the plan and make contributions on their behalf for them once they've been there for 3 years or more. So the rules are that employees must be over the age of 21. I'm going to presume that your employees are over 21. They have to earn more than $600 in the past year, and they have to have worked for the business for the past 5 years, or for 3 out of the last 5 years. So you have a window of time here now where you can continue to do this on your own, but at some point you are going to have to make a different decision. So if you want to explore options other than the SEP for your continued retirement savings, recommendations for that replacement plan would really have to come from a deeper conversation and a better understanding regarding how you want to compensate and incentivize your team, if at all, and how you want to continue to save for your own retirement and get the most that you can put into those retirement savings. On your business value, Diane, we asked you to, give us a relative business estimate, and you said $250,000. And we've talked about this. The value of a financial firm is really dependent largely on revenues earned and by the owner's plan for succession. The absence of a willing buyer makes your business worth absolutely nothing. If your clients disappear because you've left and they don't know anyone else at your firm, there's not a lot of value there, or certainly a lot less than you might think. It can really take years to prepare a service business like financial advising firm for sale or buyout because you have to build in that plan as you go along. And so, at age 45, it's not too early to really start thinking about how you want to exit your business later and begin planning now to build that value for a potential buyer or a successor to buy you out. If you want, we can recommend a financial business valuation specialist for you, and they can help give you a plan for how to get to that if that's what you're looking to try to do eventually. I know for some of us, we're never going to stop working, but maybe sometime our brain is going to stop working and we really should stop working. So a plan does really need to be in place. Fred, on your equipment, I know you've got $250,000 invested in it. Your equipment can't be depreciated until you've formed your business and moved it into your business formally. Until then, the best you can do is perhaps take it as an expense against any hobby income you might create with it during the time prior to the creation of your business entity. Once you become a business, you can start depreciating it, and that's going to help you a bit at tax time, perhaps. Retirement analysis. Okay, so we're winding down here, thankfully. I'm sure you're getting tired of listening to me. Current retirement assets, $4,010,000. This does not include the cash value of the life insurance because I don't have enough information to include it at this time. Current savings annually, $92,000. That's what's going into the 401k and the SEP, as well as into the various assets, the $4,000 to $5,000 per year into the different mutual funds. You have roughly 20 years to retirement. That would take you, Fred, to 67 and Diane to 65. You have weighted average returns on your portfolio of about 9.43%. Current inflation, as we discussed earlier, is about 3.24%. So when we look at the inflation-adjusted return on your portfolio, it's at about 6%. So the potential growth of your retirement portfolio over the coming 20 years, if you continue to put $92,000 a year into the investments, will be about $16,244,000, almost $245,000. So that's great. That's really good. And 6% may not be where you would like for it to be. And yet it's solid. So, maybe you want to stay with it. Again, like I said earlier, there may not be a need to take any more risk than that. You're sitting in a pretty good position here. So, looking a little bit deeper then, if we look at current living expenses that are around $164,000 annually, and then we try to extrapolate what your potential income in retirement would be, you're going to be taxed at future tax rates, which are presumably lower than the current tax rate based on all of your earned income. So if we, and there's going to be this mix of both capital gains, 20%, and ordinary income tax rates, which 20 years from now, we don't really know what those were going to be. But if we went with 20% for cap gains and 50% as you are now, maybe stepping it back to 30% or even 20% on the low side income tax because you have so much less earned income at that time, that taxes will be taking quite a lot less out of your income each year. We're also going to make the assumption here 20 years out that you can live on about 80% of what you currently live on in today's dollars. So $131,200 a year retirement income need. And then let's also assume no outside income, that all of your retirement expenses would be covered by your retirement savings, because we have no mention of Social Security being available to you in 20 years, and there are no pensions in your portfolio. So guaranteed income sources don't really exist for you as the portfolio currently stands. Let's also assume that you are as healthy at retirement as you are now, and that you will each live 30 years in retirement. We want to make sure that if you do live to 96, that on the first day of your 96th year, you're not out of money, because we plan to 96 or 95 and not to 96. So we want to take the long view for you. And as things change, of course, we can change the plan. But for now, let's take the long view and see, what are we really looking at here? So, for you, because you do have a good amount of assets, this was a fairly easy process. If in 20 years you have $16,244,887.63, will that last for 30 years? Well, yes. Without even accounting for investment growth on what remains in the account, that amount would deliver, $541,496 a year if you just divide it by 30. Even if your tax rate's still 50%, you'd have more than twice as much as you need to live on yearly. Of course, there's a lot of variables. Fred could never make money again. That's unlikely, but it's possible. It's unlikely, and we don't want that to happen, Fred, okay? You won't save $92,000 per year every year for the next 20 years. Maybe something comes up. Mom gets sick. Vicki needs a lot of education, whatever it is. You can't put the money away. That's going to impact the plan. Diane, you could get sick and be unable to bring in your income each year. That would definitely impact the plan. The market could tumble and take your whole portfolio down with it. That, of course, would make a big difference, right? So given that we don't have a crystal ball, and given the incoming inherited money and your current savings and spending trajectory, your retirement years really should be financially sound. You have 20 years to plan for that. We want to help you do that. We want to stay with you through that process. So with your continued planning reviews as you get older and as things change, that's going to be really key to the success of your retirement and your financial plan. So the only remaining important question is, who's going to receive your assets at your passing? This is where the estate planning comes in, and this is the last section we're going to talk about today. This, by the way, is the math worksheet, so that if anyone's interested in looking at how I came up with some of those numbers, you can take a look. Okay, little typo there. Estate planning should not say action next to it. It's estate planning. Proper estate planning is a critical element in the care of your assets and of your family, both now and in the future. So as your assets accumulate and grow, having a plan for how those assets will be used by you and your family during your lifetime, as well as at your passing, will serve as a guide for how those assets are positioned in your portfolio, how they get taxed in your lifetime, and how much of it will be available to your family to keep once you're gone because of good estate tax planning. So estate tax planning or estate planning is a process in and of itself, and we're prepared to guide you through it. We can offer you referrals to a number of excellent estate planning attorneys if requested. We're willing to go and sit down in those meetings with you, so that that extra pair of ears and planning thought can be brought to bear in that meeting. We'll help you with that planning. We'll review your current wills and trust, the trust documents from your mom's estate, Diane, and we're here to make recommendations based on the full scope of the information. In fact, we have, through one of our insurance brokers, an estate planning attorney who works for them, who evaluates trusts for us because we're one of their regular clients for free. It's a great value add, and he does an amazing job, just an amazing job. I can't say enough about him. So we're very willing to bring that resource to the table for you. So these are the known estate planning elements that I know of that are in place. I have not been provided these yet for review, so we're going to have kind of a high-level conversation about estate planning for you. My understanding is that you have revocable trusts with credit shelter provisions, which is very similar to what your dad had written for your mom and what allowed those dollars to come down to you, and which are now in your care. I am quite sure that you will be taking care of your children the way that your parents took care of you by doing many of those same trust structures. You have durable powers of attorney. You have a healthcare power of attorney, living will, and pour over wills with guardianship provisions for the children. So that's just an amazing, great start. I'm so glad you did that. I know you were feeling a little weird about it when you first did it because you are so young and healthy, but we just don't know when we're going to meet our demise. So again, plan for the worst and enjoy all the best. So some of the factors a couple of factors that could impact, that are likely actually to impact your planning over the years to come, your estate planning is, you're both currently in good health, and each of you may have long lives ahead of you. Fred, your dad passed away after years of poor health, and your mom is showing signs of dementia at a relatively young age. Do you expect to have any of those same health issues? If you do, then let's make sure we plan for eventual outcomes or things that could potentially happen. And again, if we plan for that worst outcome and it doesn't happen, it's a blessing. But if we had a plan in place, it's also a blessing. Diane, your parents have both passed away now. How old were they at their passings, and what health issues did they struggle with? Do you think you're going to have any of those same health issues? Same goes for you. Let's talk this through and think try to plan ahead for those eventualities. The other planning issue that you really have in estate, and this is huge for you, is that the estate and gift tax exemption is $10 million per person, which is quite a bit. You have a $20 million unified tax exemption that's allowed before any estate tax is assessed at 50% on every dollar over that amount. So when you continue doing a good job with your investments and the growth of your investments and your companies and your the way that you've been able to grow your assets, this is going to become a bigger and bigger concern for you and for your children. So you are going to be well in excess of that exemption. And while that exemption could change over the coming years, you really have to plan today using today's exemption rules, because again, you do not know that you're going to live beyond these exemption limits. So some of the questions that you're going to want to think about as you move forward with your estate planning are, how do you want to divide your property and your assets at your deaths? Have you funded your trusts, the ones that you've currently put in place? How are your assets titled? If we're in a common law versus a community property state, the titling can be done differently to accommodate those different types of laws. Are there any specific provisions in your mother's estate that need to be considered in your planning, Diane? Do the two of you or either of you have any philanthropic or charitable goals? Would you like to help your future grandchildren go to college? Is there anyone in the family that needs special planning needs to be done for them? Is there a spendthrift in the family that you have to plan more carefully around? Have you reviewed your beneficiary designations to make sure that they're all in alignment with your current estate planning objectives? Can you identify your priorities in the estate planning area? So, I'm going to give you a copy of this to go home with. In fact, I'm going to email it to you when we get done here so that you'll have those questions. And I'm sure that there are many, many others. We're running a little long here, so we can pick this up again in another meeting. But based on your stated goals and objectives, we can help you prioritize them and begin to plan for them, suggesting a course of action that can get you there. Estate planning tools include both revocable and irrevocable trusts and life insurance, along with a multitude of tax planning techniques and investment guidelines to help minimize the damage that can be done to an estate at your passing without good planning. Once the plan is in place, we're here to help make sure the plan is properly funded and that the implementation of your plan goes smoothly. Estate plan reviews should really happen every 6 to 12 months because no estate plan is ever complete. They're constantly changing as changes in your situation often make these plans obsolete. It's an ongoing process. For you, it's important to start soon as there's a lot on the line, particularly as these new inherited dollars come to you. So action items, I'm going to send you these notes as well as referrals for estate planning attorneys, CPAs, and business valuation specialists. I will send you several names in each category, and I would encourage you to talk to all of them and pick the ones you feel are best suited to meet your needs. And then for you, I have a fairly lengthy list for us to go to the next level in this planning process. I'm not going to read those out loud now because you can see them here and take them home with you. But they really do all refer back to everything that we've talked about and some of the further documents that would be needed to further the process, and then also a number of meetings with outside professionals to begin the process of upgrading your insurance coverages, upgrading your estate plan, etc. And then we're going to set our next meeting for 6 months out, December 10th, 2018. We're all going to stand up to the smart board here and sign off on this, and then I'll save the document and we'll send it off to you by email. And that is it. I hope I haven't completely put you to sleep. Thank you for your attention and for the pass. Bye.